Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and nasally and congested. I feel like I got a hairball on the back of my throat, so I apologize in advance, especially if you hear some kind of pauses, clicking, clacking, and smacking because I got cough drops and everything else. But I will struggle through this. I will fight the good fight because we're back to talk some Steelers football. Took a little bit of a break, not quite a suspension, but a break for earlier in the week because I'm just sick and tired of talking about some of this stupid stuff with Mason Rudolph and Myles Garrett. And I'm sure some of you in the comment section, especially over YouTube where it gets a little lively, are a little tired of that too. To join me in ignoring most of, it'll come up again, I'm sure, but we'll try our best to ignore it. The Qui-Gon Jinn to my Obi-Wan Kenobi, a one Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's going on, Bri?
I'm shorter of breath and another day closer to death.
I know that. I was going to say, happy 75th birthday, bro.
That is not correct.
But it is your birthday. That's why
it is my birthday, but not 75. 56.
Yeah, I wanted to tag you with the Qui-Gon, the sagely kind of elder Jedi master. So
yeah, I'm okay with that. I was okay with that reference.
And Liam Neeson, because he's a badass, he's a grown ass man.
That's right.
Really,
I have a certain set of skills.
I will find you. And yeah, one of those things. We need him. We need him for a few of these Browns fans that are just trolling. I think somebody, and they were actually pretty, I'm going to say, pretty level-headed in their comment on YouTube. And I don't know, they may return to listen in a week or so. They probably aren't a frequent listener, and they probably got this recommended because it said Cleveland Browns or something in it when we were doing the breakdown. And you remember my first thing was like to keep it clean, or I'm gonna start, I'll delete or I'll block people. And he was saying, well, why would you delete and block people? Well, you're not seeing most of the internet filth that we usually see, and I'm used to it. I don't want to hear things about things from the past. And, I am going to bring this up real quick because it's still underneath the, it's a thorn in my side here with the Mason Rudolph thing. If you didn't have a chance, Steel City Underground on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, or on the website, I did a full article. I have videos, I have stills. Go read it. It's a great breakdown of what's happening there. Clearing the good name of Mason Rudolph. Please don't try and make him out to be a victim. I understand there's some extracurriculars there, but what was the tweet? It was somebody, we read it earlier, and you know what? I'm going to have to pull this up because I want to credit this. John Kuhn, believe it or not, of all people, he tweeted out, if you're not familiar with John Kuhn, this is the former fullback for the Green Bay Packers, longtime fullback. And he goes, my take on Rudolph and Garrett, yes, I get mad when I get bit by a mosquito, but I don't need to crush his head with a brick when a simple smack will do. And, of course, Charles Woodson had one of the top comments on this. And he goes, you don't live in Florida. Mosquitoes a little different. It's like, okay, man, I understand. They're the size of New York City rats, but, it's just one of those things. But anyways, if you're interested in further discussing that, we got bigger fish to fry. The only thing I'm going to mention that wasn't mentioned on any of our shows here is that all of these appeals processes and things like that. A couple things here. One, I expect Myles Garrett to play next year. I do believe that this is he's made an example of, so other players don't follow in this path. He's gotten 6 games. I think it'll be like the Martavis Bryant thing, from a couple years ago, where you're waiting around the beginning of training camp. They're gonna make him sweat, I think. But I think overall, a number 1 pick, a top player for a franchise that's on the rebound with a rabid fan base that still shows up to games no matter if they win any in a single season. And he's a merchandise mover. He sells T-shirts. He's a face of the franchise. He's a voice in that locker room on that defense. A star player or on the rise, all of these different things. I don't think a guy like that's going to be sitting on the sidelines observing. However, the flip side of that is that Marquise Pouncey getting tagged with 3 games I thought was a bit ridiculous, because if Myles Garrett does return next offseason, you're going to tell me what he did was only twice as bad as what Pouncey did, and I'm like, I get Pouncey was kicking him in the head on the ground, but there's fights and then there's swinging helmets at people and trying to crush their cranium in. So I'm just going to leave it at that, Brian. If you got a couple extra comments, then we can move on and talk about the Bengals.
Yeah, look, all I have to say about this is that there is no justification for escalating whatever the altercation is to the level where death is a potential outcome. If somebody punched me in my nether regions, which of course is the big claim and didn't happen.
Did not happen.
Let me be clear. Did not happen.
It's in the videos. It's in the videos. It's in the article. Go check that out. It did not happen.
Even if it did, if somebody walked up and punched me in the nads, I am not justified in shooting them in the skull. It doesn't escalate quite that way. And for people who think he got what he deserved, or that, who was it? Sheldon Richardson, who's like, oh yeah, we got what he deserved. There is no, unless he had a knife hidden in there and was stabbing Myles Garrett, then there's no justification. And that's the way I look at this. It's is there blame to go around in all cases? Probably. Did it start with Mason Rudolph? No, it started with a late hit by Myles Garrett. And I did see a commenter out there who said, not on our YouTube channel, but out in the Twitterverse, who claimed if it was a late hit, why didn't it get flagged? Well, let me answer that. The refs stink. Okay?
Yeah.
The refs stink, buddy. That's the way it goes.
I got something to add to that too. It actually, I believe it started with the late hit earlier in the game where he took the helmet-to-helmet shot. So this is an escalation from that. If that doesn't happen, he's probably Mason Rudolph. They're already losing the game. It's a frustrating game. He threw 4 picks. He's aggravated. All these different things, tensions building up. But this is a guy that was knocked out for several weeks in a concussion protocol from a helmet hit, who took one earlier in the same game, saw his teammates taking them as well, 2 to be exact, Juju and Deontay Johnson, not only to be hit late with seconds left in the game that was already in hand and going to be a Cleveland Browns victory. And even if it ends at that, let's say these guys did throw punches. Even if Myles Garrett just threw a punch, or let's say he just pulled him up to his feet by his face mask, and there was some shoving and a pull apart. I don't really know that that's worthy of a suspension. I think at the most you're going to get a fine. I think Ogunjobi coming up from behind and shoving him on his duff might end up in a suspension more than if these guys just had a little bit of fisticuffs, almost like a hockey fight. You know what I mean? But it was all the extra stuff. So I'll leave it at that. If you want to go check it out, steelcityunderground.com. I put it up a few days ago because I just couldn't take it anymore, and just trying to point fingers and blame and justify things. There's no justifying the additional acts there. I can put myself in. You and I were talking about this. It's like, hey, have you ever been in a fight and the things that happen, and you go where your head goes and all these different things. I got a whole bunch of descriptions there, but I wanted to close the door on that just because we didn't get to talk about suspensions. That's going to be something that's going to it's going to hinder the Steelers a little bit here, because they're going to go in now to the next 3 games without Marquise Pouncey, their starting center. They're at 5-5. We previously discussed, they could lose 2 games. We said 10-6. We thought was the magic number. I don't think they're going to catch the Ravens for the AFC North lead. It doesn't look like the Ravens right now. We said this in the preseason. We credited the Bengals with maybe having a talented roster, and then their offensive line fell to pieces, and so they had mustered no offense. I mean, there was a game where I think Joe Mixon ran for exactly 0 yards, and Andy Dalton was the leading rusher with like 8 or something like that, or maybe even -2 was another one, and they've just been not good at all. And I understand the Steelers haven't been good on offense, and that's something we're going to talk about too. But winless Cincinnati Bengals 0-10 here. This is a game the Steelers cannot drop. They could sweep the Bengals for the series here. That'll help them within the division. We talked about the Browns not being the crowned preseason Super Bowl champions, and I really banged the drum on that. So far, correct. We'll see what happens going forward here, because they get the Dolphins on Sunday, but hey, you never know, man. Anything can happen. But the Ravens was a team that we were like, Well, this is either going to work or it's not. There's no in between here. And it's been working. And Lamar Jackson looks like an MVP candidate right now. He's looking like he's having a season like Patrick Mahomes. I still don't think he's quite the polished passer, but he's like throwing the ball around like it's, backyard football, and it's working even with their like 50 tight ends and, pounding Mark Ingram as they may. I don't think that defenses right now, and I'm saying right now as in the 2019 season, I think teams are going to figure it out and add personnel come 2020, much the same way when you had, Colin Kaepernick and RG3 running around with the RPO stuff many years ago and how successful they were. I think they're going to eventually figure it out. The Steelers, believe it or not, are the only team that's really managed to corral that Ravens offense and losing in an overtime game on a crap call. So the way we're viewing this as far as everything now is the Steelers are going to need to be second in the division, earn a wild card. And, they're really right now, they're kind of competing with Buffalo and Oakland as of now, unless some other teams rally here for one of those two spots. And anything can happen there. They get a game against the Bills at least. So we're thinking maybe one more loss overall. They get the Browns again after the Bengals. They have they have a Cardinals team that's all over the place, but they're capable of generating points. I haven't been necessarily impressed with the Buffalo Bills, so to speak. They've been getting the job done. They've been getting the victories that the Steelers have not been able to get. And then you have the Jets and the Ravens, of course. And, of course, if it comes down to that at the very end, and the Ravens, let's say the Ravens aren't playing for anything, you think they sit some people? I mean, there's always a possibility there that benefits the Steelers. You just never know. But, we're looking way off in the distance. This is a pivotal game because you don't want to, for morale reasons, you don't want to lose on the road to a winless team that you've, in fact, dominated for such a long time. Let me see here. Steelers have won the last 8 games against them. And that's a regular season streak. That's not including some of the postseason games. Last time they played at Cincinnati was 28-21. It was a little bit closer. And, of course, the last game in September that was at Heinz was 27-3. And that's that was the one that turned everything around. We could see if this can turn their season back in the proper direction, because I think this would be just what they need in order to heal some wounds. Unfortunately, there's a lot of wounds here, Brian. And,
oh God!
And I don't even know where to begin with this. And I kind of want to settle some fans down that are, let's play Duck Hodges and let's do, Mason Rudolph is absolutely terrible. And this guy, this is going to be his 8th start. He hasn't even consistently started because this season started out with Ben Roethlisberger as your quarterback. He goes out at halftime in the second game against the Seahawks. Mason's just kind of thrown in there. He's managing some games, and he wins against the Bengals. He gets knocked out against the Ravens. So he literally plays like a half of one game, starts 3 games, but only plays half of the third game that he started. Then you have Duck Hodges go in there. Then you go on a bye. Now you're back to Mason for a few games, 3-game win streak. And now all of a sudden, because you're on a short week on Thursday Night Football, where you have your Pro Bowl running back, Pro Bowl receiver, and rising rookie wide receiver all knocked out of the same game. I mean, how do you cope with that? You lost Ben, then you lose Mason, then you're down to an undrafted guy playing quarterback. They're lucky they're even at 5-5 right now. And they also not only lost Connor, Benny Snell, who is now back to practicing. There's a guy that everybody was excited about in the preseason, and that's the way I've been talking about this. This roster, kind of walking into this game, looks very much like the preseason roster, at least on offense.
Yeah, look, the injury bug has bitten them very hard, and then you add into that, Pouncey's suspension. There is some encouraging news, like you said. Benny Snell, Deontay Johnson has practiced fully yesterday. He's still in the protocol, but there's a chance he could play. But they're going to be undermanned. I saw a meme out there that said, if you put the Penguins and the Steelers together, they still couldn't field the whole team.
Yeah,
because of the injuries. And it is what it is. Now, we have talked about this, and we talked about it before, around the bye, about what the Steelers could do to make the playoffs, and potentially even take the division. I agree with you. I think at this point, the division is probably lost to them. It would take a massive choke or slide by the Ravens for the division to become back in play. I think, what are they, 3 games out now?
Yeah.
And that's probably more than is surmountable, based on the Ravens' remaining schedule and where they stand right now. But a wild card playoff spot is still certainly in play. I think actually we will have a very good idea of whether that remains true after Sunday's game. This to me is not a game they can lose. They cannot. This is an opponent that just is terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Just flat out awful. They cannot lose this game. Even in their depleted condition, they can't afford to lose this game. There's no telling what will happen with the remaining games. We knew Browns games were going to be tough. The Ravens game is going to be tough. And to be quite frank, the Jets are playing better than they were early in the season. So there's not a game other than this one on the remaining schedule where you can say that's 100% a win.
Yeah.
And so
the Cleveland one is. The Cleveland one is for sure if they're healthy.
If they're healthy, which we know they're not going to be. Plus, Pouncey will be out for that game unless they reduce that suspension to a single game, because I think he would miss that one as well, regardless. And we'll just see. And I don't want to get to the crux of my concerns yet, but I do want to address the Devlin Hodges, Mason Rudolph thing. Yeah, Mason's going to play, period, and stop. Just stop with the Devlin Hodges thing. Yes, he played okay, but you complained about Mason not going down the field. The one time Duck Hodges went down the field, what happened to the ball?
Yeah,
let's just throttle that concern back. This is a season that anything we get out of it is probably a plus at this point. And as I said, my ultimate goal is to make that pick that they gave up for Minka be lower than 20, because then it's a steal. It's already a steal. It's a steal if it's a top 10 pick.
No, it really is. I mean,
but I want it. Hey, look, I have to say his name right from now on. If I don't, I have to flog myself or something. I don't know. But I just look at this game and look at it and think, you don't want to say this is a must win, but for them it probably is, because I don't think they can go under 500 again and then hope to get back into the playoffs. And let me be frank, even if they get into the playoffs, I don't expect them to go anywhere.
No, I mean, I have no expectation as I knock over like my cough drops here. I'm trying to figure out how best I want to say this, because you know what, when we were talking about the Browns game, I didn't have a good feeling about that game. It's hard to have a good feeling about this game when there's so many things that are tumultuous, just up in the air. I mean, for all intents and purposes, do we think James Conner is going to be ready to play? I think they'll sit him. I think Mike Tomlin will feel good about, whoever he throws back there. And he's been trying to throw everything. Tony Brooks-James is on the way out now. Ralph Webb, who was in camp, and he looked sharp. I mean, he was a kind of speedy guy who hit the hole kind of hard, fast, almost like Trey Edmonds, but a little quicker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know what you do with all that. There's so many things that were just going on. Hold on. Let me go through. This was in like the last week alone. We were talking about, okay, Sutton Smith was added to the practice squad and then he was released. That was on November 7th. Darren Hall is running back. He was signed to the practice squad. Then all of a sudden, Rosie Nix and Ryan Switzer went to IR. They promoted Tevin Jones before the game from the practice squad, and they signed Jayrone Elliott back to the active roster. Now, all of a sudden, 2 days later after that, they poached Deion Kane from the Colts practice squad. They signed Kareeth White And they signed them both directly to the 53. You can't take somebody from someone else's practice squad and sign them to your practice squad. So they had to make that move to the 53. It's the only way that works. And say goodbye to Jayrone Elliott, who was just there, and Tony Brooks-James out the door. Then all of a sudden they brought Kadri Henderson in and Amara Darbo to the practice squad. Now, I think the Henderson move, is to... I don't think it's to sharpen up the special teams. I don't think he's going to go to the 53 personally, Brian. I think it's for practice. I think it's to prepare because, the Bengals, who is this, Alex Erickson, he's a damn good returner, man. And you cannot afford, and we talked about this in the back rooms, the way this game's going to shake out, the Steelers should end up on top, provided they don't shoot themselves in the foot. I talked about You can't have another 4-interception game. You said, well, it may only take 1 or 2 turnovers. And particularly if those turnovers are, within your own 20 and you give them the ball in the red zone and a gift and free points, even if it's a field goal, that might be all it takes in order to, lose, I guess. You can't have some of these holding penalties against guys like you got Carl Lawson, you got Geno Atkins, you got Sam Hubbard. So, they have some formidable guys there, but you can't shoot yourself in the foot. The offensive line changes for a third straight game again because prior, when they played the Rams, they moved Filer in from right tackle over to guard into Ramon Foster's spot rather than have B.J. Finney there, and Chuck Okorafor was playing right tackle. Then they went back to the regular starters last week. Now you got B.J. Finney inserted as the center. So there's all kind of things moving around here, moving pieces. I mentioned Ralph Webb was signed here to the practice squad. Before I get scatterbrained, Tazar Skipper was signed off the Giants practice squad. They placed L.T. Walton on IR. He got hurt, I guess, in practice. And then J.C. Hassenauer, who was in camp the previous 2 years, and he was playing in the AAF for the Birmingham Iron. He was signed. He's a center. He's signed to the practice squad. Kevin Rader, my guy, tight end, now back off. So anyways, that's a lot of stuff. Darryl Drake was the wide receivers coach. He passed away during camp. So you had to go with what's his name? Sherman. Why can't I think of his first name? Ray Sherman was just kind of there as a consultant and got kind of thrown into full-time coaching, which he probably wasn't expecting to do. I think he was only going to be there for the offseason. You have Randy Fichtner, who had this comfort level with Big Ben. They didn't think they were going to go into the season so with Mason Rudolph as the guy. So Mason Rudolph wasn't the guy, during camp. Sure, he got some reps, but he was competing with Josh Dobbs. He was sharing a lot of that load. Randy Fichtner is also the QB's coach. So you don't have another QB's coach there either. They made some changes. Terrell Austin ends up coming in. We've seen some good things with the defense. Mike Munchak left as the offensive line coach. So on top of all of these players, this is just like the month of November here. And having Connor and Juju and all these guys like getting hurt. Vance McDonald was hurt for a while, and then Xavier Grimble, he ended up getting put on IR or released with injury designation. They had to trade for Nick Vannett, who ended up getting thrown out there with like a couple days of practice. This has been a very roller coaster ride as far as the roster and depth chart, and particularly on the offense. The defense, of course, lost Stephon Tuitt. Vince Williams wasn't there for a little while, and then they added Minkah Fitzpatrick. Sean Davis got hurt earlier in the year. The Steelers can't catch a break. They're snake bitten, and somehow, luckily, they're at 5-5. I still think the talent, I know I said preseason roster, but I still think the talent is there enough to compete with the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll have to see what's all going on with the Bengals and their injury report as well. You got some guys that were just rested. Most of the ones are inconsequential, I think, except for limited with a thumb. Sean Williams, safety. He'll probably play. He's one of the guys that starts in their secondary. But overall, I expect, what do we have here from the FanDuel Sportsbook? I meant to pull this up early, and I didn't. I'm not sure what the line is on the game, but I'm going to find it here in a second. It is, the Bengals are getting 6.5. So the Steelers are actually favored by almost a touchdown, which is quite surprising. But the over-under, Brian, 38.5 on this game. What's that tell you? Another close game with two offenses that have been unable to generate points, albeit the Steelers a little bit better at 24th in the league with 20 points per game. The Bengals are 30th with 14.7 and 28th on D, allowing 27.6 with a lowest of the bunch, 32nd against the run. The Steelers are going to pound the rock, and I don't see Mason Rudolph making a lot of mistakes. That's the way I look at it, provided they get somebody they can hand the ball off to.
Well, let me talk about Ryan Finley, who is the Bengals quarterback now that Andy Dalton is, not playing.
Yeah.
And in 2 games that he's started, the Bengals have scored 13 points and 10 points. They have problems scoring. There's no question about it. He's thrown 30 and 31 passes, completing 53% or 41%. He's got a combined passer rating at this point of something like, 49, I think, or 52.8. I ain't scared of Ryan Finley, and I don't think this defense will be either. You're right. There's going to be a lot of Joe Mixon. And I think that the defense can feast on the Cincinnati offense. The only way I see Cincinnati getting points is if the Steelers give them to them.
Exactly.
And so, from that standpoint, I feel like, this is a game, regardless of how bad our offense has been, how inconsistent and how inefficient it has been, where we've got a better chance of scoring points than the Bengals do. And even with all the injuries, because I think our defense is going to be able to create some turnovers, get the ball, in opportune positions. Maybe this is another Wizard of Oz 6 field goal kind of game. Who knows? But yeah, what they cannot do, what absolutely cannot happen, is turning the ball over. You cannot give Bengals the opportunity to score and put the defense in bad positions, especially deep in the other side of the end zone. And, we do not want a renewal of the streak of the first series is a turnover that we had going and was broken in the Browns game, at least. And we can't give away, safeties and other kinds of points. We just can't give them points. As long as we make them earn points, I don't believe they will. This is a game the defense could easily get a shutout in. And it just is. That's just the way I think it is in realistic terms. The Steelers defense is very good and is much better than the Cincinnati offense right now. And we should see that a dominating factor. If the defense has an off game, or if the offense can't maintain drives and keeps putting the defense out there, by the second half they're going to be tired. Then all bets are off. But this is even in their depleted condition, this is a game they should win. The Bengals are just that bad.
No, they are that bad, and I know some people are thinking, well, last week Joe Mixon ran for 86 yards and got a touchdown. He broke off a 30-yard long. Finley broke off a 24-yard little scamper there. And, otherwise, I know Mixon got about 4 yards, per carry. But when you're looking at put apples to apples here, the Raiders defense is not the Steelers defense. The Steelers defense, I know they were creating a lot of splash and turnovers, but aside from splash and turnovers, they've been shutting everybody down. It's just one of those things where I think that's overwhelmingly what gives the Steelers the edge in this game. It's not even, being a homer or anything like that. It's just flat out the Raiders defense is not great. They, they're somewhere toward the end of the pack in pass yards, and they're somewhere in the middle against the run. Take it for what you will there. Their offense is actually a little bit better, though. I hate to say a little bit better. The Steelers just have no traction on offense. I think that's the only thing. But we've seen Connor break off some runs. Very few, I guess, but we've seen a big game from Jalen Samuels. We've seen Mason Rudolph able to get some drives going. I know some of those have ended in field goals. I think this could be something that's a little more of a confidence builder for him. provided guys catch the freaking football. That's the other thing that's just shot the Steelers in the foot, and there's just a lack of focus or whatever. And that's the reason why I brought up the Darryl Drake thing from earlier, because I think that's had an impact on the Steelers receivers this year. Guys just aren't catching the ball, and I'm not sure if you place blame on coaching, on individual players, or a little bit of both. But it's something to kind of remember that, oh, you know what else, Brian? There was the whole offseason. Le'Veon Bell, even though he didn't play last year, Antonio Brown, Mike Munchak leaving, all these things were these other things, and then they were trying to drown out the noise. So you had all of these changes overcome in spite of all of these guys dropping like flies, and the turnstile or carousel, as Tina Rivers wrote about over on the website, the carousel of players floating in and out, and somehow still able to get this done by hook or by crook, and still should have a better record for all intents and purposes if the refs didn't stink. But folks, if you are interested in laying some money on this game, we do want to let you know that the Steel City Underground podcast is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, and there are always more ways to win on the FanDuel Sportsbook live in Pennsylvania in partnership with Valley Forge. FanDuel Sportsbook is the premier mobile sports betting app, and for a reason. They made it easy to sign up. They made it easy to deposit. They've got tons of betting markets, and unlike offshore sportsbooks where you're lucky to get your winnings at all, FanDuel processes your withdrawals quickly and gets you your winnings in as little as 24 hours. That's kind of something important for those of you who are ever online poker players, of which I was. Practically all of those things were offshore, like Isle of Man or Cayman Islands or wherever they had those housed. Like I won't mention one of the names of one of the websites I was on that I used to play online poker, but I was one of these lucky guys that was able to cash out like maybe about 3 weeks before, everything hit the fan, and, the government seized like all the funds and froze them, and people were out a lot of money. And I know some people ended up getting some of that back and some didn't. This is legit above the book. This is here in the United States, in the state of Pennsylvania. Also, we mentioned New Jersey and some other locations they're working on, now that, there's more legalized gambling out there. Take advantage of doing this instead of sending your money to Lord knows where, you know what I mean? And that's and it's easy too, because you could do it from your phone. If you happen to be going down to a game, obviously if you're in Cincinnati this weekend for the game, as I will be, I had to throw that out there. I don't know why. Maybe because I'll be talking about it. We'll see if it's miserable or if it's an invasion. I think it's going to be an invasion because, ticket prices are it's like a fire sale right now. And there's still Steelers Nation that wants to see their boys, up and close. They want to see their guys there. So they're going to get behind them and they're going to support the guys. But right now, FanDuel Sportsbook is available in Pennsylvania. So if you're there for a sporting event, if you're there for, Thanksgiving coming up, there's a few games that are going to be played on Turkey Day. You're visiting family, you're originally from that area, you can live bet the game right from your seats or live bet from the comfort of your own home. So this isn't a thought experiment. This is for real. Right now, FanDuel is giving new users their first bet risk-free. That means you can place any bet and FanDuel will refund you up to $500 in site credit if you don't win within 7 days of signing up. And you know what? When was the last time the bookie or the offshore guy or whatever site gave you a do-over, gave you a mulligan? That doesn't happen very often. So if you want to claim that risk-free bet, download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, available on the iOS or the Apple App Store. Also available for Android. There's some shortcuts to grab that from the sportsbook.fanduel.com website. And when you sign up, if you want that risk-free bet, don't forget the promo code SCU. That way they know Steel City Underground, me and Brian, sometimes Zach, we're the ones who sent you. So we're sending you out there. But just make sure you put that in there, because obviously we get credit, and then you get the risk-free bet on the FanDuel Sportsbook. And, of course, you must be 21 or older, present in New Jersey or Pennsylvania in order to do this. Site credit is non-withdrawable, so you will have to use it. You do get the mulligan, but you don't get to just take all the money back with you, okay? So there is a little bit of risk there, but you get a freebie, okay? Expires 14 days after receipt. Terms apply, and if you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. I get addicted to certain things, so it's a very serious thing out there, with mental health and things of that nature. 1-800-GAMBLER. If you have any gambling problems, or if you're just addicted to the Steelers, we'll try and get you a hotline number. Just don't call ours. So, because I won't be very good for your therapy, nor will Brian. Brian's throwing like rubber bricks at the TV because we threw a real one not too long ago and had to get a new TV.
Yeah, well, no, but but yes, I have plenty of bad call bricks that I can throw at the TV, and look, I'm going to tell you, I try not to do that even with the soft bricks because I like my TV.
Yeah, well, if you haven't, it's a nice TV. That's a nice rock. If anybody knows the reference, that's Shrek. You're very Shrekish. I could be Donkey, I guess. I wouldn't mind being Donkey in this case because he's super fly.
And you're an ass.
Oh. Hey, you know what? I set myself up for it. Hey, who doesn't like parfait?
Well, that's a good point.
Everybody likes parfait. You don't like parfait? You never heard nobody say, "Hey, I don't want no. You want any parfait?" No, I don't want no parfait. So anyway, Eddie Murphy, Mike Myers, they were great. Even some of those films. And you know what? If you've never seen those and you're thinking we're just being like goofy right now, even if you don't have kids and you're not in it, you think, "Oh, it's a silly animated movie." It's a heck of a comedy. At least the first one's great. The other ones, they tail off as anything does when you get to sequels and things of that nature. I don't know, man. I'm trying to think of what else we got as far as storylines here. I mean, we're talking about injury reports. We don't know. It sounds like Mike Tomlin was a little iffy on. He wouldn't reveal anything about Juju's condition whatsoever. He's got a knee brace now from that hit and the concussion protocol. He did not practice. Deontay Johnson had a full practice, but is still in the protocol. We saw with Mason Rudolph, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get cleared. We talked about Josh Allen getting hit weeks ago, and he was immediately available for the next game. So everybody handles these, head hits a little differently. Benny Snell came back, but Tomlin was a little hesitant to discuss his availability because he's a rookie and he's missed lots of practice time and reps. So I guess it depends on how sharp he looks. Connor, as we mentioned, back with the shoulder. They said the shoulder isn't as bad as it was before, but I just wonder if they don't have like the kid gloves or baby him or whatever to just make sure he's available, because you know what, you're about to get into this December football where running the football is very important. You got to keep those guys as healthy as possible. Artie Burns showed up as limited with a knee. I mean, he's very important to the special teams role and containing somebody like that Erickson, as I was saying. That's the other one. Brian, is the special teams. I kind of glossed over that a little bit, but they can't give up special teams points, and that could very much happen when you're calling guys up that are normally playing special teams, and now they're playing a prominent role in offense or defense. They may not be still be playing on special teams, or they're gassed a little bit playing those extra reps. I mean, that's something you gotta take into consideration there. Another one of those guys is Ola Adnei. He had a full practice, but also in the concussion protocol. Nick Vannett shows up with an illness as a DNP. You had a couple of guys, I guess, with veteran days off or just giving them some rest, such as Vance McDonald and Mark Barron. Marquise Pouncey did not practice. It wasn't due to any type of injury or anything. I assume this is just to give B.J. Finney the lot of the snaps and reps in practice. But Dupree showed up limited with a triceps. You got to hope that's not going to bug him either, because Ola being in this concussion protocol, they're already razor thin at that outside linebacker position. As far as the Bengals, it looks like Billy Price showed up on this with the back limited, and I already mentioned Sean Williams, the safety. Most of the other guys were due to the rest, or they're guys like A.J. Green that are probably never going to play this year. One that I will mention was Auden Tate, wide receiver, took a nasty hit as well last Sunday against the Raiders. He was a do not practice. He's in the concussion protocol. I don't know where his availability will be. He's pretty much the guy that's been holding the load, because if you remember at the beginning of the season, John Ross, he went to IR. They got 21 days. I don't think he's going to be activated in playing Sunday. That's just my opinion. But he's back into the rotation. He's going to be designated for return. AJ Green has just not looked like he's going to play at all with that ankle that he hurt, the very first, practice very first training camp day in the spring. And like I said, Tate was on the rise and somebody that probably had a decent report. I mean, he was targeted a ton of times in that game, and he's been, a guy that's been targeted 6-7 times over the course of, these games and with Finley playing and everything like that. I got to make sure I don't call him the wrong name like Mike Tomlin did. Called him Lindley. So, and I mean, there's Tyler Boyd, there's Tyler Eifert, those guys as well. But the offensive line for the Bengals is just so atrocious. I don't think they're going to be able to run the football very well. I know some people were saying, well, there's some teams that have had success running the ball against the Steelers. I think that was before. Was that BF before Fitzpatrick or before Minka and not after Fitzpatrick? So hasn't been, if that's all the more that they can do, it kind of reminds you of the Steelers. Everybody, hey, let's throw 8-9 in the box and challenge them to throw the ball. You may very well see something like that because Steven Nelson, I think, one-on-one man coverage, he doesn't get beat very often. I know he did it was Odell Beckham, okay, last week. Joe Hayden, same difference. Terrell Edmonds, some people are saying whatever they say, but, it's been very quiet. It's not like he gets beat a whole lot either. Tight ends has been the leaky hole in that defense as it had been before. And overall, with the exception of, Tuitt being on IR, they're at 100% strength there. I just don't see anywhere where there's a matchup really where you should see the Bengals offense. If they drive like 80, 85 yards and score a touchdown, we have some major problems on our hands.
Oh, God, yes. As I said, look, everybody can have a bad game, all right? Again, like I said, the Rams defense gave up, 50-something points to the Bucs, and they look like they're finally coming around. Anybody can have a bad game, but they cannot have a bad game because the only way this team moves forward right now is if the defense stays at the top of their game. They've got to make every game a grind for the opposing team. They've got to continue to create turnovers, get sacks, not give up the big plays whenever possible. And they had been pretty good at that up until that Browns game. They still are, I believe, one of only two teams that hasn't given up a 40-yard plus run. And them and the Raiders, surprisingly enough. And I think that's the advantage that they have is despite what people want to claim, despite when they want to go back to the Patriots game and whine about the defense, this defense is a much better defense than played in that first game. This is a verging on elite defense if they're not already an elite defense. You've even with Stephon Tuitt being out, Tyson Alualu has played fantastically in place of Tuitt, as has Javon Hargrave. They've gotten the job done for the most part, and that is what they need to lean on. I for one am fine going back to the schema that says take what the defense will give you on offense from the standpoint of the Steelers. Don't put Mason in positions to cost you the game. They have gotten a little more aggressive with him, and it hasn't worked out fantastically. That is not, as you said, not all Mason's fault. Guys are dropping balls, but you have to take all that into account. You're operating with, second-tier players in a lot of cases. These are not your starters anymore. You've got to watch what you're doing. So they need to be smart with the ball on offense, avoid turnovers, don't do anything really dumb, and let the defense carry them through.
Yeah, don't do anything dumb. That's sound advice. I think that's exactly what Tomlin's going to tell them in the locker room. Don't do anything dumb.
Don't do anything dumb. It's just every game is going to be a tough game, and anything that the offense does to cause a problem is going to make it that much tougher. Because the offense is simply not equipped right now to make up for their own mistakes, which means the defense has to do it. And so they've got to limit mistakes on offense and just let the defense play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what the offense can't do is I'll even be happy if they could run let's say 6-7 plays and chew up 3-4 minutes. That's all the more. Yeah. I'd be okay with that. And let's move the needle on a field position battle, and let's see if the defense can get a 3 and out and bring the offense right back in where, it should be a punt and you're getting a little bit better field position. Maybe you can be a little more aggressive. It's kind of the way I see it. I see it as like, this is going to be inching in either direction. I mean, you see, even though the Browns had 21 on the scoreboard, the Browns offense didn't really put up 21 points. And like I said, if they would have played a different team, they would have played the Ravens. The Ravens might have put 60 points on them in the way they played in that game, because the offense just wasn't doing anything of substance, and they were completely out of sync. So they just got to do a couple of things there and keep the time of possession about 50-50, or at least get the edge. And this is one thing that's the big thing. I would say, should the Steelers defense, get some splash plays or turnovers, the Cincinnati Bengals, I think, are dead last. I'm bringing this up right now. I think they're dead last in turnover differential. Oh, no, they're 30th. They're -11, and the Steelers are second with +9. So it isn't Andy Dalton chucking the ball around. This is still a rookie quarterback. What round was he? 3rd or 4th? I'm trying to think.
I don't remember, but
who cares, right? I mean,
yeah, it really doesn't matter. He's not their future.
I don't know. Yeah, it was one of the most puzzling things. And how about this? When you look around the division, you went from a division that had Big Ben, Joe Flacco, Andy Dalton, and then whoever the Browns guy was the flavor of the moment. But you got all guys that are like in their first or second year right now. 3 of them, all taken in the same draft of the previous season, are the guys that are heading up these teams, which is interesting. So, it doesn't even say like on his profile on their website. Of course, why would it say that? I mean, he was from NC State, which I already knew. I could have got that off the top of my head. I hate sometimes when I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm delaying. Let me see. Yeah, he was a 4th rounder. So, for those of you who hate Mason Rudolph, this guy was taken even later in the draft, where there wasn't as many good quarterbacks, in this year's draft. So, I don't know necessarily what to say. I mean, it is the unknown. Ryan Finley is the unknown. I think we tend to know the rest with the Bengals. Bad offensive line, incapable. The only thing they should be able to do is run the ball, and they can't do that effectively well. You're going to have to watch for Tyler Eifert, but you know what? He's been ho-hum this year as well. They got CJ Uzoma, and then Drew Sample was on the injury report too, and I know he had gotten a little bit of playing time here or there as they try and figure out what they're doing. The one thing that isn't there is Marvin Lewis, so you don't have anybody to make the bonehead mistakes, and Hugh Jackson wasn't brought back there either. So
yeah, amazing.
You get good old Hugh. I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot of predictions other than I think they should be able to get to Finley. I think they should get to him 4 or 5 times, cause some havoc, and then it's going to be a field position battle. This may even be another one of these Chris Boswell Bengals classics where he kicks a bajillion field goals. So we're going to see how this is all going to shake out. Keep your eyes on the injury reports, of course, because I mean some of the guys being available, it's going to be probably Jalen Samuels and whoever else. And that might be Benny Snell, and provided he doesn't make any mistakes, then maybe it's Trey Edmonds. We'll see if Connor is going to be used at all. We don't know anything about Juju. This may also be into the Steelers' favor because now, like, who do you zone in on? If Deontay Johnson's active and out of this protocol and James Washington, this may be some opportunities for those guys to finally shine too. And by all means, they've had some opportunities downfield, and along with Johnny Holton, where they have not held on to a ball that, we get so spoiled and used to guys like an Antonio Brown or Martavis Bryant over the years that have come down with these. If they would have come down with these, I think the opinion on Rudolph would be a little bit different. This is the team that you should be able to make this type of statement with. And I see the Steelers winning this game. Do you think they cover the 6.5, though? I don't know.
Look,
this doesn't matter as long as they win, but I mean,
this game could end 7-0. And it could be all defensive scoring. It could be Minka takes another interception back for a touchdown, or there's a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and that's how the game ends, 7-0. So this is why I think that you take the Steelers and the points. I don't think the Bengals can score. And so what you're betting against is, are the Steelers going to make a bunch of bonehead mistakes and turn the ball over a bunch? because that's how you're going to lose this game. So as long as they don't do that, yeah, I think they cover the spread. I don't think this will be a blowout by any means, unless they get to Finley 100 times, knock him out, knock the ball out of his hands, I meant to say, or get him to throw some costly picks, and he's got 9 turnovers. Then it'll just be a laugher. But then again, they got 4 turnovers against the 49ers, and that didn't turn into a laugher.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just don't know how things are going to go. I think that the Steelers should easily cover that spread against this team because I just don't see how they're going to score.
Well, just to give you a little frame of reference, and probably the last thing to close out this show, a lot of people are going to be like, well, the Raiders are in a similar position, wild card type team, 6-4 record, and they were only able to win 17-10. Well, it's the same thing where they were kind of shooting themselves in the foot too. You end up with they fumble, they have an interception, there's a load of punts, there's drives where they only had 4 plays, 3 plays, 5 plays. 1 play, which was just a kneel down for the end of the half, so that doesn't really count. 6 plays, 35 yards with the interception, 3 for 4, 4 for 33, 8 for 40, and then, of course, the end of the game. So they only had like 3 drives where, they had some 3 scoring drives and some positive yardage there. I mean, that's pretty much what we might be looking at with the Steelers. They just cannot allow anything as far as the Bengals. The Bengals were able to muster 12 plays, 77 yards for a TD in the first quarter. They missed the field goal, which is par for the course, and they turned one of these drives over on downs, 10 plays, 48 yards. I remember I actually saw that during the game, and I was just like, it was just a really, you want to talk about blown plays and looking disjointed. I mean, it looked probably worse than the Steelers' feeble attempts on Thursday night to convert on third down. So that's pretty much where it is. I would like to see, as far as play calling, and we're talking about coaching, that's the only other thing I think I want to see differently out of the Steelers, to be completely honest. I am so sick of waiting to get the third down in order to get a first down. Whether it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, can we please get more than like 3 or 4 yards on first and second downs? Let's punch it in. Let's convert it. If it's 2nd and 1, don't toss I almost said the biscuit. This isn't hockey. Don't toss the ball downfield 40-some yards and then run some other boneheaded play on 3rd and 1 that ends up making you punt. That's the thing that needs to get cleaned up too, I'm going to say. So there is some onus on the coaching as well.
Oh, absolutely. And whoever, whether it's Tomlin that's taken over again and
We're speculating on that, yeah.
Yeah, is calling the plays, or whether Fickner is calling the plays. They just have to be smarter. I get it. You got to look at the results, and you got to look at who you got, and don't put the offense in a position to put the defense in a bad position.
Absolutely. Actually, I was more or less speculating if Tomlin's been calling some of the defensive plays. When they showed him on the sidelines, they don't show him a whole lot. Where he had an index card Thursday night in his hand, and this was like in the middle where I'm looking at the play clock, and I'm like, hey, the radio I think is live there. It looks like he's feeding some information in there, so I don't know. Could be something that we observed. Maybe it wasn't what we thought we saw. I don't know. That'll be interesting to see. Obviously, the defense isn't the problem here, though, so we'll see if Mason Rudolph can have a decent game. And you know what? For all intents and purposes, statistically and otherwise, he was managing games pretty well, just as they try to unshackle him and open up the playbook a little more. He needs a little bit of help. He needs some pass protection from that offensive line, and he needs some guys to hold on to the ball. So, Brian, thanks for joining me once again today.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to do so. And I just want to reassure one of our Twitter followers, Hagen, who's a podcast listener, that no, less weight does not mean less podcasts. I promise.
Oh, that was the other reason for not jumping in and doing an extra show, because we did almost 90 minutes on the previous one, which I think was practically a record. We try not to get too long-winded here, and when we find ourselves in that position, we bid everyone adieu. And that's what we're going to do right now. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. As always, we encourage our listeners to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.